Questions of Doom.
Hello and welcome back to another Questions of Doom. In this series, as ever, I attempt to answer questions that you send my way using the archaeosoup@gmail.com email address, as displayed on the YouTube channel homepage, but also, as you will see at the end of this video. In answering these questions by video, it is my fond hope that the answer is made useful not only to the person who has asked the question, but also anyone else out there who may be thinking or wondering the same thing. Now, today's question, is a bit of a frequently asked question. It's one which I have responded to on occasion as individual emails, but I thought I would make a short video or medium-sized video about it, if only to be able to point people in its direction, because it seems lots of people do wonder about this particular topic. And the topic is forbidden archaeology. Is there such thing as forbidden archaeology? And if there is forbidden archaeology, how can archaeologists who don't deal in forbidden archaeology get away with not talking about these forbidden facts in their own narratives? Now, you can probably tell by the way that I'm saying forbidden archaeology that there is a bit of a tongue-in-cheek when I'm saying it, and that is the reason for this is that the short answer is no. There is no forbidden archaeology, and there isn't a giant conspiracy to keep the little man down and to further the goals of current political motifs, social enterprises, etc. In the world today by really seriously manipulating the past. How do I know this? Well, the reason why not necessarily know it in terms of a positive, but the reason why I know it and that it's unlikely in terms of the way in which other people go about proving this is that some of the ideas which are posited are frankly desperately wrong. What we're talking about is pseudo-archaeology. For those of you who haven't come across the term, it's archaeology which is based upon a predefined idea and more or less sets out to prove that idea. It doesn't modify itself when contradictory evidence is found, and you are invited to join a world of clandestine groups, secretive organisations, and ultimately an alternative worldview which is founded ultimately upon fantasy. Some famous examples would be aliens, for example, coming to Earth and depositing knowledge at the same time in Australia and in Mesoamerica, or various searches for Atlantis. And for example, in Middle Eastern archaeology, people often suspect that there's a grand orchestration going on to further the goals of certain political groups. Now, I won't necessarily go into the political aspects, mainly because it is a very touchy area. But that's not because there is a conspiracy going on. It's more just that there are certainly, of course, individual people with certain biases who want to prove what they think. But that is just as flawed as other pseudo-archaeologists. So probably the best one to discuss would be things like aliens. Now, for example, when you often come across books which talk about aliens in archaeology, they will make a supposition that aliens have visited the planet, and based upon that supposition they'll make another one, and then another, and then another, until eventually you're invited to join a whole new world view based upon a ladder of carefully positioned suppositions. Often they are based on the loosest of observations in archaeology, and they actively ignore the context of these archaeological finds. So, for example, a certain motif that looks vaguely similar in Australia and Mesoamerica, even if they're not from the same time, and even if they're demonstrably not made in the same way, or perhaps have been changed over time and just look similar now. This will be ignored by the person who is positing their argument because they want to essentially prove what they already think, and that is that aliens have visited the planet and deposited knowledge in different places in ancient times. Now, this ultimately, I suppose, the reason why people keep on asking the question about this is that it's very charismatic, and I absolutely can see that. Pseudo-archaeology is often portrayed not only as a secret alternative truth, and come in, I will show you secrets. Welcome to my shop of intriguing things, but also as well, actually, it's often presented in a very attractive way. If you go into any discount bookstore, or indeed actually bookstores which often have lots of art materials as well associated. For example, here in Britain there's a chain called The Works. You're bound to see a series of books, some of which will be very good, glossy books with lovely pictures about archaeology, and right next door to them, almost imperceivably in terms of the change, you'll see books which are pseudo-archaeological in nature, but presented in a very similar way. They are attractive, they're easy to read, they have lovely pictures, and frankly I love a book with pictures. I find it very difficult to read a book without pictures. Indeed, my copy of Beowulf is a copy, yes, with Old English and New English or Modern English, but also actually has loads and loads of lovely photographs from Denmark, from England, and etc. etc. in it, because I find it easier to learn and to read, I suppose, with pictures. You heard it here first. But so it is very charismatic, and I can absolutely see why people get these books. But I suppose what I always say to people who ask this question about whether or not there is a forbidden archaeology is you have to, as you're reading it, be critical. You have to say, well, okay, well, this first chapter has laid out the broad supposition of aliens, and then the next chapter will say, well, if aliens did visit the planet, here is some evidence for it. And what you've got there is very subtle. You've got the suggestion, and then based upon that suggestion, you've got the assumption that the suggestion occurred. And that's not a good way to make an argument. It's a good way to force your point of view on others, but it's not a great way to build a decent narrative of the past. So the converse of this whole conversation is that archaeologists attempt to do just that. They attempt to build a cohesive and often self-critiquing narrative of the past, a reflexive development whereby new finds will have an effect upon old finds and will bring them into a new context, thereby growing our idea of what the past is. An excellent example of this would be in Star Car, the Mesolithic site in North Yorkshire. It has been re-investigated very recently. It's set to have more investigations in the very near future, which have shown it to be completely different to what we thought it was only 10 years ago. Only, in fact, as little as 7 or 5 years ago. This is real archaeology, in so much as the archaeologist is willing to modify their statements about the past based upon new evidence. So I suppose that's the best way I could say of actually finding out and really testing the water when you're reading a book about archaeology and the past, is whether or not the writer is seeking a truth or seeking proof of their opinion, if you see what I mean. So the short answer to all of this is no, there is no forbidden archaeology. If there were things being found and then being hushed up by some government agency somewhere, then in this day and age it would be almost impossible to keep that under wraps. And I say that also partly because there are so many things which have been done in a dodgy way in the past in archaeology, that archaeologists have more than some professions, I would argue, become extremely careful in how they find, how they discuss their finds, and also how they publish their finds, so as not to force their opinion onto the work. Some archaeologists do still do this, but at the same time they do it in a way which is more constructive than simply saying there were aliens, and aliens, here's the proof, aliens, even if it's drawn, very crudely in crayon. So as I say, there is no real forbidden archaeology, and when it comes to, for example, some of the broader institutions such as Middle Eastern archaeology or certain religious institutions, which I have discussed in a previous Questions of Doom, it is easy to go, oh well, these people must have an agenda. But more often than not, when you're working with them, it becomes very clear that their agenda is more often than not that of curiosity. And very recently, an archaeosoup follower or fan pointed out that archaeologists in the Middle East have been very honest about not being able to find, for example, evidence of, or much evidence of an exodus, a massive movement of people from Egypt into the rest of the Middle East in and around the time of Moses. So you are very easily invited into this world of conspiracy and forbidden archaeology. But hopefully you're also wise enough to be able to discern what is blatantly trying to turn your opinion towards their own, and what is trying to simply share something of the past with you. And I'm sure that you are wise enough to tell the difference between the two. I certainly wouldn't assume that you're not. After all, you have the good taste to be watching Archaeosoup, don't you? So there you go. Thank you very much for all of those people who have been asking the question about this forbidden archaeology. I will put in the video information below on YouTube, if you're watching this via YouTube, a link to the A to Z video P, which is all about pseudo-archaeology, and also to an associated channel, I suppose, of Archaeosoups, or a channel very much that I'm a fan of, called Archaefantasies, who deals solely with pseudo-archaeology, and you can go and check out her discussions and work there. So, as I say, thank you very much for asking the question. I have rambled a little bit, but ultimately it's because this whole issue is one which is pervasive, but ultimately is of very little substance. So it's you can make your way through it, so long as you're willing to seek out things in a critical way. So, thank you very much, and until next time, bye-bye.